At the will reading, I got nothing years later. They didn't expect me to become a billionaire. The mahogany conference table stretched endlessly before her, its polished surface reflecting the stern faces of family members who had gathered like vultures around fresh carrion. Sarah Mitchell sat rigid in the uncomfortable leather chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap as Attorney Harold Pemberton adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat with the practiced authority of a man who had delivered both fortunes and devastation with equal measure. The law office of Pemberton and Associates occupied the 23rd floor of a prestigious Manhattan building, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of Central Park. The autumn leaves painted the landscape in brilliant oranges and golds, but Sarah found no beauty in the scene before her. Today felt like the end of everything she had ever known. Her grandfather, Theodore Mitchell, had built an empire from nothing. Starting with a single hardware store in small-town Ohio in the 1950s, he had expanded into construction, then real estate development, and finally into a diversified conglomerate worth nearly $2 billion. Sarah had spent countless summers at his sprawling estate in the Hamptons, listening to his stories about the early days when he worked 18-hour shifts and slept on a cot in the back of his store. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. Now around the table sat the beneficiaries of Theodore's legacy. Her uncle Robert, Theodore's eldest son, fidgeted with his gold watch while his wife Margaret whispered calculations under her breath. Their twin sons, Bradley and Harrison, fresh out of Harvard Business School, were identical expressions of barely contained greed. Sarah's Aunt Patricia sat with perfect posture, her Botox-frozen face revealing nothing, while her daughter Vivian scrolled through her phone with studied disinterest. Then there was Sarah's own father, David Mitchell, Theodore's youngest son. He avoided her gaze entirely, staring instead at an oil painting of Theodore that dominated the far wall. Sarah had always been the closest to her grandfather, the one who actually listened to his stories, who understood his vision, who shared his passion for building something meaningful. She had graduated summa cum laude from Wharton with degrees in both business and finance, and had worked summers at various Mitchell Company subsidiaries, learning the business from the ground up just as Theodore had taught her. Attorney Pemberton began reading the will with the mechanical precision of a man who had performed this ritual hundreds of times. The numbers were staggering. Robert would receive 40% of the company and the primary residence in the Hamptons. Patricia would get 30% of the company and the penthouse apartment on Fifth Avenue. Various grandchildren would receive trust funds ranging from $10 to $50 million. Sarah's name was not mentioned as the reading continued. She felt the walls of the room closing in around her. The central air conditioning hummed quietly, but the space felt suffocating. Her throat constricted as she watched family members exchange satisfied glances and barely suppressed smiles. The weight of exclusion pressed down on her chest like a physical force. When Pemberton finally reached the end of the document, the silence in the room was deafening. Sarah's father still wouldn't meet her eyes. Uncle Robert was already discussing transition plans with Bradley and Harrison. Aunt Patricia was making notes about the Fifth Avenue property. Sarah rose from her chair on unsteady legs, her hand gripping the edge of the table for support. The blood had drained from her face, leaving her pale and hollow-eyed. She had expected something, not everything, but something. A token of the relationship she thought they had shared. Recognition of the countless hours she had spent by his bedside during his final illness, reading him quarterly reports and discussing market trends, even when the morphine made him drift in and out of consciousness. The betrayal cut deeper than the financial loss. Every family gathering where Theodore had praised her business acumen, every private conversation where he had shared his philosophy about building lasting value rather than chasing quick profits, every moment she had believed she understood her place in his world, all of it had been an illusion. Outside the law office, the October air bit sharply against her skin. The city moved around her with its usual relentless energy, but Sarah felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching life through thick glass. She walked aimlessly through the streets of Manhattan, her heels clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that matched her racing thoughts. By the time she reached her small studio apartment on the Upper West Side, the sun had set and the city lights twinkled like distant stars. The apartment was modest by Mitchell family standards, a converted one-bedroom that she rented with her salary from her entry-level position at a mid-tier investment firm. The contrast with the lavish lifestyles her cousins would now afford was stark and painful. That night, Sarah sat on her narrow bed with her laptop open, staring at her bank account balance, $47,000. It was everything she had saved from her job. Every penny carefully hoarded while her classmates from Wharton bought expensive cars and designer clothes. It was supposed to be the foundation for something bigger, but now it felt impossibly small against the magnitude of what she had lost. But as the hours passed and the initial shock began to wear off, something else emerged from the ashes of her devastation. Anger, yes, but more than that, a burning determination that started as a flicker and grew into an inferno. If Theodore Mitchell could build an empire from a single hardware store, if he could transform himself from a working-class kid into a billionaire through sheer force of will, then she could do the same. The next morning, Sarah submitted her resignation letter. Her supervisor was incredulous. She was throwing away a promising career for what he saw as wounded pride and unrealistic dreams. But Sarah had made her decision. She would prove that the Mitchell legacy lived on in her, whether Theodore had recognized it or not. She spent the following weeks liquidating everything she owned. The jewelry her grandmother had left her, the designer handbags purchased during more optimistic times, even her beloved vintage Steinway piano, everything had to go. By the end of the month, she had raised $73,000 in cash, the plan forming in. Her mind was audacious and risky. The technology sector was experiencing unprecedented growth, with venture capitalists pouring billions into startups that existed only as PowerPoint presentations. Sarah had been following the trends obsessively, reading every trade publication and financial analysis she could find. She understood that the old rules of business were being rewritten daily, and that fortunes were being made by those brave enough to bet on the future rather than the past. Her target was a small software company based in Austin, Texas called Dataflow Solutions. Founded by two MIT graduates who had developed a revolutionary approach to data analytics, the company was struggling to find investors despite having technology that Sarah believed could transform entire industries. The founders, she had learned through careful research, were brilliant engineers but poor salespeople, unable to articulate their vision to traditional investors who didn't understand the potential of their innovations. The day before she left New York, Sarah took one last walk through Central Park. The trees were nearly bare now, their branches reaching toward a gray November sky like supplicating arms. She thought about all the time she had walked these same paths with her grandfather, listening to his stories about the early days of Mitchell Companies. He had often told her that success wasn't about the money you inherited, but about the value you created. She had never understood how prophetic those words would become, or how bitterly ironic. Now, standing on the threshold of an uncertain future with nothing but her education, her determination, and $73,000 in cash, she finally grasped what he had been trying to teach her. The Mitchell family had chosen to exclude her from their legacy. Now she would build her own. Austin, Texas, greeted Sarah with unseasonably warm weather and the kind of entrepreneurial energy that made New York's financial district seem stodgy by comparison. The city pulsed with innovation and ambition from the gleaming tech campuses that dotted the landscape to the converted warehouses where startups burned through venture capital at breathtaking rates. Dataflow Solutions operated out of a cramped office space above a barbecue restaurant, the aroma of smoked brisket providing an oddly comforting backdrop to late-night coding sessions. Sarah's first meeting with founders Michael Chun and David Rodriguez was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in December, exactly 6 weeks after the will reading that had changed her life forever. The presentation they gave her was technically brilliant but commercially incomprehensible. Their data analytics platform could process information streams that traditional software couldn't handle, identifying patterns and correlations that human analysts might miss entirely. But they explained it in terms so abstract and technical that Sarah could see why conventional investors had passed on the opportunity. What they had built, Sarah realized as she studied their demonstrations, was nothing less than a crystal ball. For the digital age, their algorithms could predict market trends, consumer behavior, and operational inefficiencies with unprecedented accuracy. In the right hands, with proper marketing and strategic partnerships, the technology could revolutionize industries from retail to manufacturing to healthcare. Sarah invested her entire $73,000 for a 25% stake in the company, a decision that Mike and David accepted with the desperate gratitude of entrepreneurs who had been rejected by dozens of more traditional investors. But Sarah's contribution went far beyond money. She brought business acumen, strategic thinking, and an understanding of how to translate technical innovation into commercial success. The first 18 months were brutal. Sarah lived in a studio apartment that made her New York place seem luxurious, surviving on ramen noodles and determination while working 100-hour weeks to build Dataflow's client base. She cold-called CEOs, prepared pitch decks, and attended every technology conference she could afford, gradually building relationships with potential customers who could see the value in what they were offering. The breakthrough came when Sarah convinced a mid-sized retail chain to pilot Dataflow's inventory optimization system. The results were spectacular. The client reduced waste by 37% while increasing sales by 12%, generating millions of dollars in additional profit. Word spread quickly through the industry, and suddenly Dataflow had more potential clients than they could handle. By the end of their second year, Dataflow had grown from 3 employees to 45, with offices in Austin, San Francisco, and Chicago. Sarah had negotiated licensing deals with major corporations, established strategic partnerships with tech giants, and built a company culture that attracted top talent from across the industry. Her initial investment had grown to $12 million on paper, but she was far from finished. The acquisition offers started arriving during their third year. Microsoft offered $180 million. Google bid $220 million. Amazon topped everyone at $275 million. Sarah's 25% stake would have made her incredibly wealthy by any reasonable standard. But she convinced Mike and David to hold out for something bigger. Instead of selling, they used the acquisition interest to raise $50 million in venture capital, valuing the company at $400 million. Sarah's stake was now worth $100 million, but more importantly, she had proven herself as a technology entrepreneur with an uncanny ability to predict market trends and scale innovative companies. The pattern repeated itself over the next decade. Sarah used her proceeds from Dataflow to found a venture capital firm specializing in early-stage technology investments. Her track record of identifying breakthrough companies before they became household names was extraordinary. She invested in a small social media platform that eventually competed with Facebook, backed a renewable energy startup that revolutionized solar panel efficiency, and funded a biotech company that developed groundbreaking cancer treatments. Each success built upon the previous one, creating a snowball effect that accelerated with each passing year. Sarah's reputation in Silicon Valley grew from promising newcomer to legendary investor to visionary entrepreneur. Forbes featured her on their cover as the Midas touch of tech. Fortune named her one of the most powerful women in business. The Wall Street Journal profiled her investment philosophy and her remarkable ability to see opportunities that others missed. But success brought its own challenges. The financial press began digging into her background, discovering her connection to the Mitchell family fortune and speculating about why she had struck out on her own. Some articles suggested she had been cut off due to family disputes. Others implied she had stolen trade secrets or engaged in unethical business practices. Sarah ignored the speculation and focused on building her empire, but she never forgot the humiliation of that autumn day in the Manhattan law office. By her 10th year in Austin, Sarah's net worth had crossed the billion-dollar threshold. Her venture capital firm managed assets worth over $3 billion, with investments in more than 200 companies across a dozen industries. She owned homes in Austin, San Francisco, and London, collected contemporary art, and funded scholarships for underprivileged students, pursuing degrees in business and technology. The irony was not lost on her that she had surpassed her grandfather's fortune using methods he never could have imagined. Where Theodore Mitchell had built his wealth through decades of steady growth in traditional industries, Sarah had created hers by betting on technologies that didn't exist when she was born. She had proven that the entrepreneurial spirit that built Mitchell companies lived on, even if the family name didn't appear on the business cards. The call came on a Wednesday morning in November, exactly 12 years after the will reading. Sarah was in her corner office on the 40th floor of a gleaming Austin skyscraper, reviewing quarterly reports from her portfolio companies, when her assistant informed her that Harold Pemberton was on the line. The Mitchell family empire was crumbling. Years of mismanagement, sibling rivalries, and changing market conditions had eroded the company's competitive position. Robert had made disastrous acquisition decisions. Patricia had alienated key employees, and the next generation lacked both the vision and work ethic that had built the original business. Mitchell Companies was hemorrhaging money. Its stock price had collapsed, and bankruptcy loomed unless they could find a buyer willing to salvage what remained of Theodore's legacy. Pemberton was calling because Sarah Mitchell, the granddaughter, who had been excluded from the will, was now one of the few people in America with both the financial resources and business expertise to save the family company. The irony was exquisite and painful, but Sarah felt no satisfaction in their desperation. That evening, she stood in her penthouse apartment looking out over the Austin skyline, considering her options. She could let Mitchell Companies fail, allowing the market to render its final judgment on their stewardship. She could acquire the company through one of her holding entities, preserving the name while transforming the business into something Theodore might have recognized. Or she could walk away entirely, leaving the past buried and focusing on the future she had built with her own hands. The choice, for the first time in 12 years, was entirely hers to make. Outside her windows, the city lights stretched to the horizon like earthbound constellations, each one representing someone's dream, someone's ambition, someone's refusal to accept the limitations others had placed upon them. Sarah Mitchell had learned that legacy wasn't something you inherited, it was something you created. One decision at a time, one risk at a time, one impossible dream at a time. The girl who had walked out of that Manhattan law office with nothing had become a woman who could reshape entire industries with a single phone call. Whether she chose to save her family's dying empire or let it fade into history, she had already proven everything she needed to prove. She had built her own dynasty, and no will reading could ever take that away from her. The end.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.